welcome to another video with me, Elmo J. Karjalainen. You can call me this guy if that's tricky to pronounce. Today, I'm going to blah blah blah. Hello and welcome to another video with me, Elmo J. Karjalainen. You can call me this guy if that's tricky to pronounce. It's good to have you along. Today, I'm going to talk about should guitar players and indeed other musicians learn music theory, and if so, how much? So, all that after this intro. Okay, so welcome back. Like I said, today I'm talking about should musicians, guitar players in our case, be learning music theory and how much and also why. The short answer is very short and the long answer is long and complicated. The short answer is basically it depends on what you want. That doesn't really help you maybe, but what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to try to kind of validate any position that you happen to be in, because I feel that it's a very subjective thing. There is no right answer when it comes to music theory, as indeed to anything else on whichever instrument you're on, because we're all different people, so we're all going to have different routes to where we want to go. If you have a clear goal in mind, that will help. If you don't have a clear goal in mind, that could be a bit of a problem. But yeah, so the short answer is that it all depends. Now, what is music theory? I like to think of music theory as kind of like grammar when it relates to language, music theory as it relates to music. That's because I've studied linguistics, I've studied the English language, I have a BA in that, and the thing is, playing music or speaking a language, that's implicit knowledge. So anyone can speak a language because we all learn a language when we grow up. That's our mother tongue, native tongue, whatever first language you want to call it. And that's called implicit knowledge. So we know how to speak. You know how to speak English or Spanish or whatever you speak. I know how to speak Swedish and Finnish because I have two kind of equal languages. I'm bilingual. So for instance, I know the difference between good, better, best and all that. And when I'm learning to speak, I can't explain. I don't have terms for all of these, but I know how to use these words and I can make sentences out of these words and communicate whatever it is I want to anyone else who understands the same language. It's very much the same with music, so certain things fit over other things. So you have a D minor 7 chord and you know you can play a D over that. You might not know it's called a D minor 7, you might not even know that the root is D, you might not know that the note that you're playing is D over that chord, but you know that it fits. It's entirely possible to be able to make music in that way. So there's implicit knowledge. There's implicit knowledge, and then there's explicit knowledge, which is grammar or music theory, where you can use different terms to describe what it is you're doing. So run or play, those are both verbs. But when you're learning to speak language, you don't know that they're called verbs, but you know that they're different from car or guitar or whatever else rhymes with car, I don't know. Orange? Nothing rhymes with orange. So that's explicit knowledge, and music theory is explicit knowledge. The thing about explicit knowledge, it can actually help you with your implicit knowledge quite often, and that's a good thing, naturally. But that's not always the case. So if you've ever learned a second language, depending on where you've learned it, at least here in Finland, education is very much based on grammar. So I learned a bunch of grammar when I learned English. Actually, I learned English from television, so I knew English already when I started studying it at school, but it always felt kind of weird. And then I started studying French, and I learned a bunch of grammar. Didn't really help me because I wasn't interested in that. So you could learn different things kind of implicitly by maybe using your ears, transcribing stuff, just picking stuff up, or you could learn scales, and that would be one way to kind of narrow the options, so to say. So if you know your C major scale, you'll already have kind of certain options eliminated when you're trying to pick up something that's in C major, kind of as a short example. Okay, so you have implicit and explicit knowledge, and music theory is explicit knowledge. And that's great. I mean, learning explicit knowledge can be a very valuable tool. On the other hand, it's often a very academic tool, at least when it comes to certain types of, shall we say, music educations, and also when it comes to quite a lot of language education. So you're not really learning how to use whatever it is, or make music or make language, especially if you don't have the vocabulary, either musical or linguistic, but you're learning how to kind of describe what it is you're doing. So that can be a very academic thing. And what I mean by that is that, let's say you're studying English linguistics, and you're doing some kind of grammar course, and you can analyze whatever text you have in front of you. This is a subject, this is a verb, whatever, this is a noun, and all that stuff. But it won't help you actually produce a creative text. If you want to become Oscar Wilde, that won't help you. Same thing if you want to become an innovative guitar player. The theory might not help you. It might. Actually, the grammar could also help you, because you might realize what it is Oscar Wilde is doing. But that doesn't mean there's a kind of cause and effect thing going on, because by learning grammar, you don't actually learn how to be creative with language. And the same way, by learning music theory, you don't actually learn how to become creative with music. But I happen to think it's good to know the rules, because breaking the rules is kind of fundamental, especially if you want to be creative, if you want to do something new. But in order to be able to break the rules in a kind of sensible way, if that makes sense, it helps if you know the rules before you start breaking them. Just randomly breaking rules is not much of a help. But the thing is, there's that implicit side to it. So you can learn a language, or you can learn the language of music simply by picking it up. It's easier when we're younger. Then there's also the side of how do you want to use that tool, music theory or grammar? Do you want to actually describe music, or do you want to lay down rules? Because there are differences. There are normative linguists and descriptive linguists. And I assume there are kind of normative music theorists and descriptive music theorists. So some people just describe music through the help of music theory, while some people actually try to lay down silly, well, almost silly rules for how you should play music. And that's a kind of, I think, important thing, because if we take the example of language is constantly changing, so the rules are also changing. For instance, for spelling and all that kind of stuff, old rules die out. They're no longer relevant, and that's because humans are creative when it comes to language. And that's the same thing with music. So if you want to be a normative music theorist and make creative music, I think you might be in for a bit of bother. That's at least my feeling. And by the way, if you disagree with anything or agree or just want to ask anything, just ask in the comments below, or disagree in the comments below. This is YouTube, so I'm sure you will. Okay, so then you have reading music and reading text. You could kind of make a case for those being very similar as well. It's always good to be able to read text. It gives you a deeper understanding of language, and the same would go for reading music, I would assume, because I don't really read music that well, but I'm fairly certain that if I was able to read music better, I would actually be a better musician. But then there's the other side to that, which is actually hearing the music. We can all hear our native tongue fairly well, but not all musicians are great when it comes to hearing music. I remember playing he was an absolutely astounding classical pianist. He could read anything, play basically anything, and when it came time to do just 3-chord songs, he had to have the sheet music, otherwise he couldn't play. Even if I said with key we were in, he couldn't do anything. And that's partly down to being able to hear music or lack thereof. Of course, it's also down to kind of him being accustomed to having sheet music in front of him, and he kind of probably went into kind of mental block there. Those are basically the kinds of things I think we're discussing when we're discussing music theory, and you could go into actual practical examples, but those are the kind of theoretical discussions that we're having. Now, you might hear people saying that you should learn how to do this and that with music theory. You should learn how to sight read, and you should learn the modes, and you should learn how to do chord substitutions, and or whatever. And as a statement, you should learn how to read music. In most cases, I would say it's a good idea. Doesn't mean that you necessarily, or it doesn't mean that that's necessarily your best option, because our time is limited as it is, and there's almost an infinite amount of things to learn on any given instrument. And depending on the type of music that you're playing, you might actually be better served by learning something else than music theory. So if you're playing blues and you kind of know the basics of blues, why do you need to learn the Phrygian dominant mode? Why do you need to learn how to sight read if all you want to do is play blues and you got a good thing going? There's tons of stuff. You can learn different phrasings, you can learn different techniques, you can explore stuff, try to be creative instead of learning sight reading, or instead of learning the Phrygian dominant. The Phrygian dominant is a brilliantly fun mode. I love it, but at the same time, it's of no use to me when I'm playing blues. So, apart from if I wanted to do blues in Phrygian dominant, that might be a cool thing. But that's kind of the point. The answers are very individual. So it depends, and how much you should learn also depends. So what you're going to face is internal pressure and external pressure. So you're going to have people telling you you should do this, and you might start believing that. And you'll have that internal pressure as well to learn something that you know you need to learn, or it's good for you or whatever. So if you want to learn how to play like Yngwie Malmsteen, you might know that you should learn the Phrygian dominant mode. You don't know it yet, but you know there is one such thing, and Yngwie uses it a lot. So you might feel internal pressure to know how to use that mode or what that mode is. But you might be getting external pressure telling you you need to know chord substitutions, you need to know major 7 chords, major 9s, and all those with hashtags and flats and all that, yeah, sharps and flats and all that stuff. When that stuff isn't very useful when you're playing Yngwie Malmsteen. So if your goal is Yngwie Malmsteen, that external pressure might get you sidetracked. You don't have to always believe that external pressure. You don't have to believe that you need to learn how to sight read. Like I said, it's a good thing to learn how to sight read. If you have time left over from what it is, absolutely, you should learn how to sight read. Actually, I think that's going to be my next project if I have time. Because I have 2 kids, I rarely have time. But if I have time, I'll try to learn how to sight read a bit better. Because, yeah, I think it's a useful skill to have. But that being said, if you're learning blues, if you're learning Yngwie Malmsteen, that might not be the best way for you to go. And the one thing that I think is absolutely essential, and this goes for grammar as well, or language rather, is ears. So, because you're dealing with sound, and the same goes for language. If you want to speak a language, try to develop your ears. Try to get the little nuances right, because music is about little nuances. The devil is in the detail. So try to improve your phrasing, try to improve your rhythmic sensibility, or whatever it's called. Try to improve your sense of pitch. And similarly, when you're speaking language, because I speak both Finnish and Swedish, Swedish-speaking people know the difference between the sounds b and p, whereas Finnish-speaking people often seem to have a problem with that. Because, yeah, well, differences in language and all that. And I remember my old guitar teacher, Sasha, explaining to me the differences between an S with a kind of upside-down roof on it and an S with an apostrophe on it in Yugoslav, what is it, Serbo-Croatian language. And I couldn't hear the difference when he said it. So if you want to learn how to speak a language, try to actually pinpoint the differences in the pronunciation, and try to pinpoint when you're learning your instrument. Try to improve your ear. And the other thing is, try to improve your vocabulary. So the more words you know, the more likely it is that you'll be understood in your other language, whatever that may be. And the broader your musical vocabulary, the more likely it is that you'll be able to say something meaningful on your instrument. And of course, music theory can help there too, as can grammar. Grammar can help there as well. But mostly, I think the most important thing for me was always getting my ears kind of working better, improving my vocabulary, and also having the technical skill to actually produce those sounds on a guitar. Not just speed, I mean phrasing, getting the bend just right, getting the vibrato just right. And the same goes for language. My tongue can't pronounce certain things just because it just comes out like that. That's kind of the long and short of it. It's a very complex discussion, but the solution is actually deceptively simple, and it's internal to you. It was internal to me, and you might make a mistake now and again. So you might learn something that you have no use for. You might learn something, or you might not learn something that you maybe should, but I don't think those will be deal breakers. What's a bigger problem is if you spend your time worrying and kind of switching between things. Learn stuff properly, or at least in the ballpark, then you can continue developing those things that you think are important, and then pick up stuff on the side instead of just doing all kinds of stuff. Today I'll sweep it, tomorrow I'll tap a bit, then I'll transcribe a bit, and then I'll sight read a bit, and then I'll learn chord substitutions, and then I'll learn how to play like George Benson, and then I'll learn how to play saxophone, and then I'll learn how to play the cowbell, although more cowbell, that's great. Because in the end, if you're all over the place, you won't get anywhere. So have a goal in mind and try to see what that goal requires. Does it need a lot of theory? Chances are that a lot of the stuff you'll hear from other people won't actually apply to you. So that's kind of it. Figure out your goal, figure out how much theory you need for that goal, and remember to have fun with it. If you're an academic type of person who likes that kind of stuff, it's absolutely fine. That's also fine, because the reason we're doing this is to be able to do something that's meaningful for us. For me, it happens to be certain stuff, and for you it will be something slightly different or entirely different. That's what makes us humans, because we're all different. So you don't need to believe everything you hear from the outside. Do listen to it, but don't need to believe all of it. And then try to go with your thing. So that's what I think about music theory. What do you think? You might have a different opinion, because you're human and we have different opinions. Let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. And subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that bell notification thing. And support me on Patreon, because that helps me make more of these videos. And yeah, I'm not going to end by playing, because I've turned off my amp and it's difficult to reach behind my back. But I'll see you in another one. In the meanwhile, take care. Summer is here. It's all good. Bye!